It's the human who get into the crisis, not the systems, right? So the crisis management will always be driven from the humans. It will not be the generative AI that it will be solved. When anything is being evolved, we say that there is nothing else, and then another year itself, you see a much more advanced version of the same things, right? So that is why if the generative AI will burst out, I'm pretty sure there will be a X Gen AI that will come. The process of upcoming days will be that you go ask generative AI, it will give you an answer. You innovate on that particular answer and then you implement that particular thing. That is where your value will be.
Hello and welcome everyone to the next episode of the AIM Media House podcast, Simulated Reality. Today we have with us Ankit Rana from Polestar Solutions. Hi Ankit, how are you doing today?
Hey Kashyap, I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing good
Thanks for
too.
having me. Great.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for making the time. So we are going to talk about generative AI. No surprises there, but we wanted to kind of dive into it a little bit with the perspective of crisis navigation. Before I start asking you questions, there are two things that I want to ask you. One, why did you want to speak about crisis navigation? Two, what does crisis navigation mean for you in the context of
Mhm.
enterprises?
Okay. Okay. So crisis management, it is, it's a part of your day-to-day life, right? So when you talk about crisis management, it does not mean that you're talking about a disaster recovery or a business continuity planning, but we face crisis management in every day, right? So you be starting from a project which has a escalation, there you require the project team has to do a crisis management. Be it to be a client who has not been getting the payments releases, there is a crisis management for a salesperson who wants to collect it and meet the targets. So there is in every day-to-day life, you have, crisis management. And that is the major reason why I took this particular, topic to speak about.
Yeah. With regards to that, right? Initially, businesses were run on intuition in a lot of ways, right? And crisis was a day to day part of any business. Every company that is running a business has to face a crisis if they are going to be adventurous, scale, and grow, right? In that context, people realized for decision making, it would be good if we do data analysis, make data driven, cognizant decisions so that we can minimize the number of crises, right? Now you wanted to talk about the use of Gen AI in crisis management, right? Before we move into some of the use cases and identify, how Polestar is kind of building Gen AI use cases for crisis management, how has your journey observing this entire been, and what are some of the insights that you have gained where we moved from a very human based judgment on making decisions and making good businessmen were always businessmen businesswomen are always good at making intuitive calls, but then what has your journey been and how has data started to play a role, and then how has Gen AI started to play a role? So walk us through a little bit of that.
Sure, sure. So my journey has seen a lot of paradigm shifts, right? Starting from when I used to code, we used to do the coding by a hit and trial method. You don't have a lot of help, so you have to see from a lot of books, you have to read a lot of books, then you start doing a hit and trial method start. So from there, if you see, there was an era which is called as a Google era. So people who shifted from R&D to doing the Google search and then getting the code done, that was another era. And now the era has been shifted from the Google search also to a generative AI things. Now it is very easy to just ask generative AI bot that can you write me a code for this, and it will give you the code. Now, when we see this particular paradigm, right? So starting from this the age which where we used to code a lot to this particular artificial intelligence age where we will, ask a lot. So that paragraph shift is definitely there. And when we talk about the crisis management, because we are taking a very data driven decisions which is not restricted by the experience of person, this is something which will aid organizations to come up with crisis management or doing the crisis management really good. Now I'll refer to Gen AI, the abbreviation which people called as generative AI, but I'll talk about not generative AI, but it's a generation of AI, right? So people, who are growing up in this particular generation, they already know how to use generative AI. So there is no a kind of a paradigm shift for them, the new age or the young leaders. But yeah, there is a paradigm shift for the older generation. But they also understand that it's a for good, because you are taking decision not restricted by your experience, but from the facts and the values.
Correct. And now, considering that, we are kind of using Gen AI for crisis management, and you have built some of the use cases. Can you help us walk through some of the examples that you have gone through in the recent past, so that probably my follow-up question is based on that. So probably just help me build a scenario on where this was implemented, what function or what business was it, and how did it help in a lot of ways.
I'll simply talk about one of the use case which we are currently working. So we are currently working on many, but yeah, one of this particular use case, it is very good to be implemented. The process is the recruitment, right? Every company needs recruitment. Now, what we are doing is we are creating a complete recruitment automation using GenAI. Now, starting from, it's a very simple thing that you don't have to fill a lot of forms and then go through a lot of screenings of resumes and then getting into interviews and then get into a job role. So that's a simple process that a recruiter or a recruitment process happens in the organizations. But even for that particular organization, so what we are doing is that you have a simple bot where you actually say that, hey, I want to hire a person for 5 years experience, XYZ technology. So what the bot will do, or the generative AI will do, is that it will give you the job description up and say, and it will ask you that do you want to do any changes in this particular job description. From there, if you say that no, I don't require any job change and this is fine for me, it goes to the send out the notifications to different parties which are involved. So it can be the recruiter manager from HR, the HR teams who need to do these things. It will integrate with the APIs of the job portal, launch a job opening, and from there, what you can do is it will also go search for the resumes from your repository and will give you the ranking of resumes and the most relevant resume, which is as per the JD which you have created. From there, what you do is that once the JD has been there, once the resumes are there, which has been ranked upon and filtered already, so you now choose certain people and ask the bot to schedule the interview for them, right? The interviews will be scheduled using the co-pilots, which you have in, multiple from the OEMs. And then the interview will be done. And while the interview is being going on, the generative AI will ask you that, do you need any help with the questions? And so it will give you the questions in form of easy, medium, or complex, so that you can ask. And with the help of the co-pilot, what we are doing is that you can record the meeting. And from recording the meeting, you can do the video analytics. You can do the expression management. A simple thing is that whether the lip sync is there or not, whether the person who's on the video is talking or not. That's one of the biggest use case in the recruitment area. So that is something that we are currently working on, and that is one of the most liked generative AI use case that.
Yeah, no, that's a pretty cool application. But I quite didn't understand where the crisis here in the whole process was. Where,
Right, right. So talent management or talent acquisition itself is a crisis for everyone, right? So if you ask me for Polestar, we are doing interviews round the year, right? So nearly every alternate Saturdays or Sundays, the team is working on getting the interviews aligned. There are interviewers who are aligned to take the interviews. Now, nobody likes that, right? So if someone asks you to work on Saturday, I'm pretty sure one is okay, but second one is like, why do I want to do that? There is always a crisis management for talent itself, and as I always say is that there is no, the jobs are not restricted in the market. It is only restricted by the talent in the market. So you
yeah,
have to do every organization has a crisis management on the talent side of the things. So that
correct.
is why we are.
Got it. Got it. When human beings talk about AI, right, or Gen AI, And there was
Mhm.
someone who famously said, I don't know who said that, but the most intelligent of the intelligent of AI is not more intelligent than a dog, right?
Mm.
And while I'm not so sure after the advent of the whole Gen AI revolution since the past 1.5 years, that is true, but still AI is not that intuitive, right? AI in itself is very probabilistic. It's very mathematical from what my
Mm.
fundamental understanding of artificial intelligence is. When we use even, let's say, the likes of ChatGPT or other applications, it tries to take the best case scenario, and outputs in a this thing. Earlier, it was just data in a regression models. Now it's large sentences and that kind of thing. Do you believe otherwise, that Gen AI can be smarter than human beings and be implemented in crisis management, where I just go to the Chat GPT or any application and say, I have a crisis, I have this, can you solve it for me? Or do you feel that human in the loop is important? Or to reframe the question, where do you find Gen AI's place in crisis management exactly?
Okay. So I'll answer it in two ways, right? Or two different points. Now, when we talk about Gen AI, specifically the Gen AI usage and the penetration, we are at a very nascent stage, right? And if you see any kind of a process, it has three levels. It is first is the defend stage, second is the extend stage, and third is the appending stage of it, where you use it to its the highest levels. Now, if I talk about only artificial intelligence, it has been there for a decade now, right? Now, but with the generative AI coming up, we are still at a very nascent stage, which is at a different stage. We are still doing what? We are talking about advanced search, summarization, or a code generation part, hardly. But if you look it from the generative AI capability side, we are still a very what do you call it as long route to cover, right? Now, when we talk about extending the capabilities to help us in crisis management, I'll take a very simple example where you have, a lot of data which is already residing with every organization, because today what we call it as the data is the oil, right? But are we using that data, or are we able to query that data, or are we, taking any kind of an insight from data? No, we are just presenting the data in forms of charts and reports. If somebody has to find out what is the RCA, they still have to do a lot of things, right? Now, imagine you have a generative AI where you can go and question in whatever form you want, right? So you can ask relevant questions, and you can ask whichever questions you want. The beauty of generative AI is that the one of the things which is contextualization, you don't have to create a contextualization, which was missing until now from AI part of it. It is already there in generative AI. And that's where the crisis management, the help of generative AI in crisis management is being very good. Now, the second question, to answer the second question which you asked, that whether we will be requiring, a human being to be there or not, that will be there. Definitely, that will be required, because you know it's the human who get into the crisis, not the systems, right? So the crisis management will always be driven from the humans. It will not be the generative AI that it will be solved, that it will be able to solve you, right? It is like it will be the process will be that there is a crisis. You go and ask the question to the to generative AI. It will give you a kind of a solution. The biggest step that needs to be taken is how do you innovate that particular answer, and then you actually go ahead and implement that particular thing to handle that crisis management. That will be the biggest shift.
Got it. And with regards to the first point that you made, right? I think what essentially you try to mean is that there needs to be a lot of context setting in terms of the Gen AI being able to solve a particular problem, and that's where it can effectively resolve crisis, or be the most effective as effective technology. Considering that, even when it is not crisis management, or it is crisis management, when they are trying to build Gen AI in in restrictive environments, or in particular for particular use cases, there's a lot of resources that are needed, right? From the perspective of crisis management, what are some of these resources, right? Data is one, obviously, right?
Hmm.
Data, you cannot replace the data, but what are some of the other resources needed to set this context so that it is more effectively able to solve some of the problems and crises that enterprises are facing?
Okay. So the biggest and the most important thing is the organizational change, right? So that is the first change that organization has to do, or the leadership has to do. Because I don't know whether you are hearing, but I hear it a lot. Gen AI is nothing. It is just like, a bot, chat bot, right? And you can ask questions and you can ask them to write an email. That's it. And that is where it will learn and it will evolve. And that is what we have to do. I was talking to a customer 1 or 2 days back. And when they asked that, for us, we call the same things by different names. How do you, train Gen AI to do that? So I simply asked them another question, that whenever a even a new employee of yours join your company, you actually have to tell them that you call this particular X thing with this A, B, C, D, and X names, right? So this is how the generative AI will also learn it out, right? Now, when we talk about the other resources that will require, it will be, change in the workflows, that the changes in the process, the workflows that we do, the roles and responsibilities that it will change. Now, that is from the business aspect of it. There will be the change, or the resources also required from the talent side of it. Now, when we talk about talent, it may be a implementation team that will be required. The trainings for that team will be required, and the most, again, the utmost and the most prioritized one will be the patience of the leadership that is required, and the support of the leadership that will be required for that particular team. Now, coming into the technical aspect of it, we do require on this part of the cybersecurity, the data privacies, the biasness and the fairness. That is the most important thing when we talk about any kind of a responsible creator Gen AI, or responsible deployment of AI, any kind of a AI. So those are the resources which I think is mostly required.
Thank you. I think that helps really. You put things in context, and I asked about resources, but I think fundamentally what you mean to say is that needs to be a mindset change, and a very strategic top-down approach to kind of enable a revolution within the enterprise if we are to adopt Gen AI very successfully in the longer run, right?
Yes.
Longevity is another thing that I have spoken. I have spoken to a lot of leaders, and they always maintain that whenever we are looking at vendors, or whenever we are looking at enterprises, and we are trying to gauge whether they'll be successful in their implementation of generative AI, longevity is very important. They need to have a 5-year, 10-year vision. Probably in the next 1 or 2 years, they can make their boards happy by making a toy for them, which can be this thing. But can you set the context for Gen AI in crisis management and the need for patience among your end customers, and what is it exactly you're asking of them so that you can successfully build this Gen AI application, which eventually will significantly impact their work processes and help improve crisis management?
So patience, in terms of, there are many things, right? So when we talk about the patience, it is like that, you can. So first thing that we ask is that do not start treating Gen AI as 100% right answer. It will evolve, right? So that is the first thing that you need to understand from the customer's point of view, that whenever you are asking a question, we should also be doing, or adopting a framework of feedback. Now, I'll simply talk about the recent chat with ChatGPT, and I think you have also experienced that. If you ask the same question to ChatGPT twice, it will give you a separate answer. It does not give you the same answers, right? And that is where the patience is required. That if you tell ChatGPT that my first answer was, more relevant, or the second answer was not relevant to me, that is how the generative AI will learn. And that is the first thing that we should ask, that you should be patient about the answers of it, and do not just start blaming that it is wrong, or just do not start claiming it's wrong, but get into a feedback kind of a loops, that tell that it is right, it is wrong, it is right, it is wrong, it is helpful, it is not helpful. So those kind of a thing will actually are the things from where the generative AI will learn and will evolve. Now, one part of it is implementation, which is an easier one. Another part of that particular thing is the neural science behind this, which is the learning aspect of it, and that is where it happens. The other thing which we also ask from the customers to be patient upon is that it should be aligned to a strategic goal. It should not be that you're just doing something to create a toy out of it, right? It has to be aligned with some strategic goal. This is that is exactly the goal that we want to reach. That is the value, that is the priority that I want to achieve with a particular implementation of the Gen AI. If that is there, right, that moment, we all as a senior leadership knows that strategic goal is not a operational goal. There is a difference between an operational goal and a strategic goal. When you align something to strategic goal, there is a time that it will take to get it into a strategic achievement, and that is why it is called as strategic, not an operational goal. These are the few things that we ask customer to be on patient for.
Yeah, no, I think this will really help, the audience of our audience, and our audience is all leaders in these enterprises, and it helps them set context on what to expect and what not to expect as well. At the same time, I always fear one thing, and that's just my fear. There's a lot of promise around Gen AI, right? And some of the other trending technologies died a quick death, right? Like blockchain, AR, VR, while they were the buzz of the town, probably, early 2020s, they're
Mhm.
no more in discussion, at least as much as Gen AI and this thing. There is a promise, there is enthusiasm and optimism, and rightly so, because people are seeing some results around it. But this patience, right? What if it does not bear fruit? Because we are also together as a community working in AI are entering the unknown, right? But then that in itself becomes a crisis. So have you ever thought about that? Like, what if we are asking them to be patient for 5 years, 10 years, but what if it doesn't work out, like, or reach that ultimate intelligence that we are hoping Gen AI to reach? Then again, I think we'll have to resort to human intelligence for crisis management.
I doubt on that particular thing. Look, transition from of one thing to other is really a constant, right? As we say, change is a constant. You cannot stop a change, right? Now, you rightly said there were a lot of technologies in this particular decade itself that we have seen it grown up, and then it was a kind of a balloon which got busted. One of the example was the big data thing, the AR VR thing. The major reason why they didn't flown out is, like, if you see, there are different examples. So if I talk about big data part, there was an era which was like Hadoop era. Everyone was talking about Hadoop, 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 Hadoop. Now, if I answer that today, are organization using Hadoop? The answer on the bottom is yes, but answer on the top is no, because Hadoop is being replaced by more better technologies of the cloud providers. They still are using the Hadoop architectures, but they're not calling it. So that kind of a balloon has been burst. Now, if I talk about AR, VR stuff, that is more towards the fascinating thing, right? When AR, VR came up, it was a wow factor to it. But nobody aligned AR, VR technology with their strategic goals. And that is where I said that it has to be aligned with the strategic goal. If you are thinking about Gen AI, just if you are thinking from an organization level that you're using Gen AI just to write emails or content writer for a marketing team, no, you will not get a lot of help from generative AI. If you're thinking that generative AI should give me process optimization, should talk about certain things at that level, where the Gen AI is associated with a strategic goal, the level of importance automatically comes up, and that is where you will start getting the fruits out of it. Now, when you say that, have I thought about generative AI being, getting out of the market? Yes, there is a possibility, because innovation is something which has been at, I've seen at a highest level in this particular decade. Now, when anything has been, evolved, we says that there is nothing else, and then another year itself, you see a much more advanced version of the same things, right? So that is why if the generative AI will burst out, I'm pretty sure there will be a X Gen AI that will come. So it will be there now.
Yeah, I love the optimism. I'm pretty excited for what lies ahead. In one of the previous questions, you did answer as to where Gen AI is functioning in crisis management within a context, right? And you also mentioned the human in the loop that is necessary right now. Do you envision in the coming years some of the biggest dilemmas, some of the biggest crises, some of the biggest challenges that companies face, very time sensitive crisis, will be aided by Gen AI, and to what extent? Or will we have a Gen AI where we don't need to use a brain and then just, the Gen AI can be the CEO? So what is your, I don't want to call it a prediction because predictions are always this thing, but, a fair guesstimate from your observations.
Sure, sure. So to answer that particular question in a simple line, it will not be a CEO, but it will be a EA to CEO. That is where I see this particular thing going on.
Okay. Would you like to elaborate a little bit? That
Right.
was my
So
last question.
when I say generative AI, you in the start, I believe you just said that any kind of AI is similar to what a system can do, right? Now, a system, if I talk about a computer from angle, it's a tagline that a computer is as intelligent as you are, because if you create a simple program of any language, be it to be C, C++, Java, or anything, and you write hello in place of hello world, you write you are stupid. System will print that you are stupid, right? So that is why when even in the generative AI, it's all about how do you ask a question. Now, while using generative AI, what we have seen is that there's a new kind of a role which is coming up is a prompt engineering. Now, if you're not doing the prompt engineering and if you're simply asking the questions, it will simply give you a very generic answers. And that is where the human intervention will be required. As I said, the process of upcoming days will be that you go ask generative AI, it will give you an answer. You innovate on that particular answer and then you implement that particular thing. That is where your value will be. And that is why I said the CEO or the CXOs will still be the humans. Generative AI will be the assistant for that. That if you want to take any decision, these are certain options. Out of this, you need to choose one. And
Yeah.
that is where I said it will be a EA to the CXOs, not the CXOs.
Yeah, I believe EA might not be this. I don't think it's an assistant per se, because EAs are, some of the most strategic decisions in a company historically have not been taken by EAs. So if
Right.
they are to work in a crisis management, they have to be a little bit more like a right hand man or right hand woman for this thing. And it's an interesting space. We can predict as much as we want, but time will tell and we will see. But on that note, thank you so much, Ankit, for making the time. It was a fun conversation. I really had, it was very insightful in terms of understanding your perspective on where we are heading with regards to Gen AI from the perspective of crisis management. Thank you again for making the time.
And thank you, Kashyap, for having me. It was my pleasure to talk to you.